Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Chala, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, Daf Dalid. We left off on Daf Dalid, Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid by the dot in our pagination, and going back to the final topic that we learned yesterday, which is the topic of tziruf, of combining. The Gemara pointed out that there appears to be a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Mishnah that we're going to have later in the chapter. In our Mishnah, after the Mishnah enumerated and named the 5 grains, the Mishnah says that umetztarfim ze im ze, which means that, as we said, there has to be a minimum amount of flour / dough for one to be obligated to remove challah. What happens if you have the minimum amount, if you have the shiur, 5 quarters or 43.2 eggs, but it's not from one type, it sounds like all of the types together, or anyone with anyone. Our Mishnah seems to be saying, without specifying, that they combine. They always combine. The Mishnah later says, dafka, explicitly, that chitim only combines with spelt. The Mishnah writes that. It means if you have the minimum amount, but it's from wheat and barley, they don't combine. So oidim combine with all of the 3. So we're getting, again, something interesting, that spelt belongs to both groups. But the Mishnah also writes explicitly that so'idim does not combine with chitim. So which one is it? Are all of the 5 combinable, or do we have to limit each one to its subspecies to the exclusion of the other one? And the Gemara's answer here is, it depends. Whether it's going to be biting each other. In other words, you made dough from wheat, doesn't have the shear. You made dough of barley, just as an example, didn't have the shear. Combined, they have the shear. How did you combine them? By having the 2 doughs touch each other. And in the detail, touching is not enough. They have to be stuck to one the other, because you can have 2 doughs that are touching each other, maybe because you put a lot of flour, or for whatever other reason, the touch is so weak that if you were to separate them, nothing would happen one to the other. But if they are touching to the point where when you remove them, when you separate them, one bites into the other, one drags along the other, can't make a clean separation, that type of combination is something, but that is where the Mishnah later says only wheat and spelt, only barley with kusmin, shabayla shul, and shifain, not with chitim. And we spoke out the Tosfos. Let's go with that, because since the doughs look different, even though they are biting into each other, they don't combine. Masha'enkin, our Mishnah says, the Gemara, here we're speaking about someone combining the flour. When you combine the flour, it's going to look the same. I know it won't look like chitim, it won't look like sioidim, but the entirety of the dough has a uniform look, whatever that is. And the way the Gemara is saying, and therefore, all of the 5 grains, any one of them combines with any other one of them. 1 with 1, 2 with 2, doesn't matter. If you have the sum total, when you put the flours together, of the minimum share, right, 5 roivas, or 43.2 eggs, or let's go in our language, l'kula alma, if you have now 5, that's a cute picture, 5 pounds of flour, now it's chayiv and challah. Chavra, hold this. We're going to learn 2 huge topics today. The Gemara today in quantity is very little, but the content of what we're learning is a shas topic. Topic number 1, the concept of bittul that we are so familiar with, that when 2 items get mixed one with the other, that if one, let's go with quantity, has a lot more than the other, biblically, the majority, in many cases, 60 against 1, 100 against 1, 200 against 1, whatever the needed ratio is, that there is a concept of bittul. All of the cases of bittul that we are familiar with is by isser veheter, which means one item. I know there are exceptions. You're going to think about basar b'chalav. I'll get to that later. Normally, something is prohibited, something is permitted, and they got mixed together. So there's a concept of nullification. If you don't have the right ratio, it won't be nullified. But generally, The whole theme of halachic nullification is when you have isur v'heter. Basar b'chalav is heter and heter by itself. Our sugi will be two. What happens if you have isur and isur? The ground zero of this topic, listen to this, it's fascinating. Machlekes Reish Lakish and Abiyach, Machlekes Amoraim. You have pigul and noiser. These are two different types of isurim by kachim. Right, pigul became pigul because there was a machshava chutz lizman. Noiser was actually left beyond the prescribed time. They both share the same penalty of kares. So it's not, they're both mamish prohibited to be consumed. So you have a piece of meat, pigul, piece of meat, noiser. Someone went ahead, I'm giving us just specifics of how they get mixed. You ground the meat and you mix them together. And, What's the math? I'll tell you right now. Now, if you allow for the concept, for the rule of bittul to happen, even by isur and isur, let's say that there was more noiser than pigul. I'm going with bittul beroiv. Right? You didn't cook it together. Let's go bittul beroiv. So, and b'chlal, according to many opinions, whenever you have two items, even if to our naked eye they appear to be of the same amount, there's really a machloikas of whether we can be mitzamtzem. Is it even possible in this physical world to have two equal? We might not know which one is more, or whether yet possible, whether not possible. It touches a little bit upon this, but let me just say one was more than the other. More doesn't have to mean a lot more. It can mean mamish a mashu more. Let's say there was more noisel than pigul. So first of all, that would mean that if someone eats it, they won't be chayiv malchus. I'm giving kares is gaddos, but a side of the kares, when Hashem says don't do something, a side of the kares in most cases, if it's a maisa, you get malchus. Will you be chayiv two sets of malchus? Will you be chayiv theoretically? Listen to my words. Only one. Why only one? Because the minority became batal. I'll tell you more than that. When they were very close to each other, we don't even know which one was the roiv, which one was the miut. I'm speaking now practically. When it comes to malchus, you have to have a forewarning. When you forewarn hasra, you have to tell the person exactly what sin are they violating. If there is a mixture, so if we're going to go that there is bittul even by isur and isur, then the minority was nullified. If I don't know which one was the minority, whoever is doing the hasra doesn't even know how to give an hasra. There's no hasra suffix. You can't tell the guy, listen, you're going to be violating either or. That doesn't work. So there won't be any malchus. Practically. Theoretically, there'll only be one violation. So that's the first big topic. Reish Lakish is the one that says that we do apply bittul, even isur and isur. Rabbi Yochanan holds, by isur and isur, there's no bittul. Bittul is isur and heter. The first topic, we're going to see how it relates. It's so gavaldic, today's stuff. Related to this, another question. Do mitzvahs nullify each other? The ground zero topic is something that we are all familiar with. What does Hillel do when he's mekayim the mitzvah of Pesach, Matzah, Umarer? He combines them together. Now, let me tell you something. Even if you have exactly the same amount of each, if you have three mitzvahs, when you have three mitzvahs, Pesach, Matzah, Umarer, today we don't have the Pesach, but today we, aside of doing it separate, we also follow Hillel at the end. Now think about it, when you have three, not two. Or if you have two and one has more than the other. More matzah than matzah, more matzah than matzah. If mitzvahs nullify each other, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. And even if you have exactly the same, I want to say this is important for our topic of the flowers. You have two mitzvahs, is roiv over one. So how can you say you were makayim the mitzvah, let's say, of matzah, if the matzah was mixed with the Pesach and the matzah? Pesach, a kezayis, and a kezayis is two kezesim. It's mevatel the matzah. The matzah with the Pesach is mevatel the matzah. In other words, if you will apply the concept of bittul to mitzvahs, then you will not be allowed to mix them together. And our Gemara says that's why the others disagreed with Hillel. Hillel was the one that held there is no bittul by mitzvahs, which allowed him to do it. How is all this related to our topic? This is gavaldik. Let's go over here. When you have the minimum amount of flour and you make a dough, this dough is called tevel prior to removing the challah. Mamash tevel. You chayv misa b'dei shamayim. It's that serious. When you remove So it's a davar ha'asur. What are we talking about? We're talking about that our Mishnah, when do you combine them all together? That when you have the sum total of a flour of the 43.3, the 0.2 eggs, but you have them from different types of the flours from the 5 grains. Since you mix them and floured them, it's started. Hold on. Why don't we say, let's say you have 3 types. You have wheat, barley, and spelt. So each one should be bottle in the other one. And maybe there should be no isur of tevel. Let me go like this. Let me go to the extreme case, Vlad. I made 5 doughs. One of wheat, one of barley, one of spelt, one of rye, one of oats. Each one has the share. I'm getting a step ahead. It means I have 5 items that now are prohibited. I want to know what were to happen if someone goes and mixes the dough together. Another thing that you actually pointed out, Vlad, that even by the biting, the top question of the Gemara, if you made the doughs already, but then you mamish mix the doughs together, now they look the same, they also combine. Because now they're mamish, not you touch them, not nashuch. You mix them. Okay, I have now a 25-pound, the wedding challahs. You're making you don't have to make it, you have to just put the dough together. You can then break them and make them as many challahs as you want. If you say that Isser is Mavatal one the other, then there's no chiyuv of challah. And even though midarabanan you would take challah, but it would only be a chiyuv midarabanan. And if someone were then to eat that challah, or if someone were to eat the dough without removing of challah, they won't get malchus, which is what you would get when there's a chiyuv doiraisa. This is the whole daf today.
Is it an avera if you do such a mix because you're causing teva not to be made?
I don't think so. Even though we should not do that. You can't call that a sin. God never said not to do that. And I'll tell you better, Kevan, and we mentioned this in the introduction. Right. Whoever wants to exempt themselves from challah has the simplest solution. Make less. And you can make, I'm going to tell you better. I need to have a lot. So I bought 5 pounds of flour. I don't have to mix all the flour in the water. Make 2 batches at the same time. As long as they're not halachically connected, we're going to learn later how you connect them. If both of them are in a keli that has a beis kibul, if you cover them, that's what people do today. But if I don't do that, it's easy to get out of challah. If someone is looking to get out of stuff, I just want to share something. Stop, because there's a small daf. This is new shilas. That it's becoming more common, evidently, here by us. And many people have parnassus here with this, is that people not bring to your house IV infusions. There's dehydration. There are people that go on a trip to prevent themselves from getting sick. It's a very common thing. So someone asked me, can they take an IV infusion on Tisha B'Av? They are afraid to fast.
It's actually very popular now, Rabbi. It's very popular.
Very popular now. So
What's the connection? What's the shaila?
I'm just pointing out how when people are looking to get out of, there's always ways. I'll pay at it. What I'm saying now is just amongst us, even though it's a bit not so, that by the theoretical letter of the law, there's no shaila. It's not eating. But what is the issue? The issue is that fast day is an inui. And Bididi Havov, just right now, I had an issue with my stomach. I went up almost 3 days without eating. I did not feel hungry. I did not feel, because I had IV the whole time. In other words, let me say like this: if a person feels they have to break their fast because they have to, this is much better. That's a Eitz HaToiva. If a woman is pregnant, let me go to the cases where mamish, where you need this, and people say, listen, if you can't, you can't. But now that you have this option, it's a great thing. But I don't think it will be appropriate for us to be noyik heter. Okay, now that we have access, all of us, it costs a couple of dollars, so make another sale. Hashem should bless us with parnasa bar chava. If you can afford it, go $350, they'll come to your house, and you'll get not just the hydration, and you'll get your magnesium, and you'll get alle gute Sachen and B12. But I'm trying to say, Danny, that when it comes to keeping mitzvahs, if one is looking for a way out, even al pi heter, you can find a way out, but you have to always be careful whether it's within the spirit. Within the spirit, coming back to challah, don't look for a way out. Even though you can't say it's usher. Okay, that's, guys, today's daf. So these are the 2 topics. Are isur mevatel each other? is mitzvahs mevatel each other, and how is that all connected? So we're going to go straight now to Daf Dalit. Don't worry, we're going to have time to get in the whole Daf. 3 lines from the top. The Gemara's kasha is Ma'u sheyilkul al chalosan devar Torah. This is the question. Now that we said that there's a concept of tziruf, let me begin right now where you did not have the share of each one. Let's go to because it's a hemshech to the Gemara before. You have a total of the 43.2. You have the shir chal, but it's a mixture. Maybe before the shir, maybe each one, even if the quantity of each one is equal to the other one, whatever 43.2 divided by 5 is, whatever that number is, even if it's equal, each one is nullified in roiv. Why? Because there was 2 against it. No, it's wheat is the minority because you have over here barley, spelt, rye, and oats. Each one vis-a-vis the others is a minority. So maybe midoi raisa, each one is viewed as non-existent, which would mean crazy concepts that there is no biblical obligation to remove the challah, even though midarabanan for sure you have to, but not midoi raisa. And therefore, just as l'maynaf kamina, if someone, God forbid, ate from that dough without removing challah, normally the rule is Yechayiv Malkus. Really, Yechayiv Misa B'dei Shemayim. But let's speak about it practically. You're going to get Malkus. You won't be Yechayiv Malkus. Why not? Because they nullified each other. And therefore, when the Mishnah says, when it starts from Zem, it's not a kasha. It will mean Midrabanan. Is it Midoi Rais or Midrabanan? That's the way we're learning Pshat in the kasha.
Question.
Yes.
But 3 of the 5 are told us, so only wheat and barley.
So what Vlad wants to point out, very good. Now, whether some of the Noisei Kalim say what I'm going to repeat what he's saying, I don't know. I'm going with the understanding that even though, yes, there are Aves and Toldos, that's not Negeya here, the way I understand. And if it's Negeya, there's still the Kasha stands. Because I understand the Gemara looking at each one being one of the 5, and the concept of Bittul Beroiv, we don't need. The kasha isn't only when the wheat was in the minority and the barley was in the majority. We're not looking at that. Even there, even if each one had the same amount, I'm saying this on purpose because we're going to have this by the Pesach Matzah Marer regarding this concept. When you have many together, each one is the minority of the others. And this is Taka de Machlokes. It sounds like this is the Machlokes. Reish Lakish and Rabbi, it sounds like we mentioned in the intro, because Reish Lakish holds that Isurim nullify each other. Rabbi Yechanan holds that Isurim do not, Isur Tevel, don't nullify each other. L'choira, so there's going to be a Machlokes Amoraim, whether we apply this Machlokes here, or we'll see, or not. And that means that everyone will agree. Everyone will agree. So let's go. Rabbi Yoina, Machlokes Rabbi Yoina and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yoina b'Shem Shmuel, and Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Bo, all of them, B'Shem Reish Lakish. So really, it's both Reish Lakish and Shmuel. That indeed, a prohibited item. We apply the concept of bittul by Isurim. Beautiful. And therefore, there isn't biblical tevel. Why not? You have the shear. Halachically, you don't have the shear. The prohibition, you don't have here. And therefore, ein loikin al chalasan devar Torah. By the way, it goes both for eating the challah also, because challah is truma. You're not allowed to eat truma, Am Yisrael. It goes on eating it without removing challah. Wherever there is a chiyuv malchus, you don't apply it. You have the 43.2, and the Mishnah says, when we start from zemzeh, and we explain, they all look the same. So what? Midoraisa, they're nullified. Says the Gemara, where do we have that? Where do we find this concept? The ground zero, as I can mention, Pigel and Oisar. That this Rab Shimon ben Lakish, even though it was also said b'Shem Shmuel, but Shmuel, we don't have him saying something else that is similar to here. But when it comes to the 2 Amoraim, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Bo, quoting Reish Lakish, Gavaldik, you should know, this works, this is good, that Rab Shimon ben Lakish kedaite against Rabbi Yochanan. Where does Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan argue? The Spalgun. In the case where you had Pigel and Noiser. Now, when you say mixture, this detail, just for mixtures, right? Liquids, mamish, mix. Solids, b'chlal don't mix. When you cook them, they're tam mixes. Just to make the mixture more practically relevant, halachically, you ground them up. So each one has little pieces, and then you will mix them. And again, the case will be either following the approach that we can never be metzamtzem. Malachim could, when they divided the bloods, ba'agonos, that was done by Malachim. But the human beings, we can't divide something 50-50. So for Vadai, there is a roiv, or even if we could, we didn't. But we didn't know which one was the majority. That will be the case. So Rabbi Yochanan holds, Bittul is by Isser veheter. Bittul must also be by heter and heter. Because Basar b'chalav, we know that, never became Asur if you had the ratio of 60-1. So a drop of milk fell into a pot of meat. If there is 60 or more against the milk, never became Asur. But once you already have two prohibited items, you can't ever nullify it with the other Isur. Loi bitlu zedze, and therefore, whoever is going to eat it, if they had the proper hasra, and they were told, don't eat pigul, don't eat noiser, and they ate it, they're going to get twice malchus for eating pigul, eating noiser. Reish Lakish says, bitlu zedze. Now there's step A and step B. Step A means, Reish Lakish holds that isurim nullify each other. But 1 second, if I were to know that there's more pigul than noiser became batal. Noiser became nullified. Pigul, the roiv doesn't become nullified. The majority doesn't become nullified. When Reish Lakish says bitlu zeh, I just want to make clear, he's saying, technically, there's aleph and beis. Beis is, you did not know which one had the roiv, because they look to you to be more or less the same. And therefore, you could not have given the eater a proper vadai dike hasra. You gave him a hasra suffix. You told him, I don't know what's prohibited. Either or, such a forewarning is not legal. So therefore, according to Reish Lakish, he b'chlal won't get malchus. So what does Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha say? This is important. What is he saying in between the lines? That when I am telling you that the pshat in the Mishnah mitzvah from zemzeh means only midrabanan, midoiraisa, Reish Lakish says they're nullifying. By me linking it to pigul and noiser, he's also saying that Rabbi Yochanan argues. That's what he means to say. He's making a link, not just to make kedaite, but in between the lines to tell you, hold on. The answer, are you chayiv malchus for eating that tevel? Machlekes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. According to Reish Lakish, you won't be chayiv malchus. You violated the Isur Darabanan. You'll get malchus mardus. You're not going to get malchus deraisa. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, prohibited, roiv miut, doesn't matter. They're not nullifying. However, Amar Rabbi Yosi, I disagree with you. Meaning, don't link by pigul and noiser. There is a machloikes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Here, in the case that we gave, everyone will hold the same thing. That l'v'loy damya. Come on, Amar ze asur v'ze asur. In the case of ground zero, which is pigul and noiser, prior to their mixing, each one was already asur. That's why Rabbi Yochanan holds, if something is already prohibited, you can't nullify where did the Isur go to, because you were mavatal it. But over here, in the case that we gave, what's the case that we gave? You don't have from any of the grains the shear that's machayev tevel. That's the case that we began with. When you combine them all together, now you have the 5 pounds. Let's go, a pound each. That means each one by itself was mutter, is not machayev tevel, like basar b'cholav. Everyone agrees, has to, like, if not basar b'cholav, how does it work? Basar and cholav is heter and heter. Heter and heter, vada is mevatel each other. Even isur and heter is also mevatel. If treif falls into the pot, if it's, let's go with the cooked, shishim, normally it's good enough. So in the case, since nothing became chayev tevel prior to them being put together, you can't tell me that Rabbi Yochanan will hold there's a chiyuv doiraisa. No, they nullify each other. You never created the chiyuv tevel. Why? Because wheat is the minority of sa'oidem, kusmin, shabay l'shual, and shifain, and so on with each one. Let's read it inside. It's shnei devarim. Shnei devarim means when you had three grains. The Gemara is saying, just for the record, according to everyone, that if you had exactly, if efshel etzaref, and you had exactly half of the 5 pounds of wheat and half of barley, everyone will hold that there is no bittul. You'll be chayiv malchus doiraisa, just to make it clear. Speaking about where you have roiv. When you have more than one type of grain, even if you have exactly the same amount from the 3, you still have a roiv. Shnei devarim rabim alechad umevatle noisei. In other words, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, that isurim are not mevatel each other. Here, you never had an isur. You never had flour of one type that has the right shear. You don't have that. You only have it when you mix them all together. So it's heter, 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 heter. Non-tevel, 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 non-tevel. So they do nullify each other. Even Rabbi Yochanan will agree that even though our Mishnah says, it's start from zem zeh, that's midrabanan, but not doiraisa. And therefore, if someone, after they put it together, if someone forgot to remove challah and they ate the tevel, or after you remove the challah, non-koyin ate the challah, they won't be chayv malchus doiraisa. Ukfar bitlu actually nasa isur. Okay. Now, according to Rabbi Yossi, what were to happen in our Mishnah if you had from each one the 5 pounds, like I mentioned? Now, he also will agree with the concept, that's the subject to the machlokes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Was even according to Rabbi Yossi, the only reason why he rejected it is because it's start from zem zeh is where you don't have enough from each one, so they combine. But if you already had enough of each one, and now you mix different doughs together, and as we explained yesterday, even when you mix the doughs, if you fully mix the doughs, we don't say, that's it, then you got a chiyuv. No matter which, you don't need to have min b'minoi. You don't need that. Even wheat and barley, because it looks uniform. Ilu amar, if the case would have been that also chamishi siyos, that you already made 5 doughs with the minimum amount each one. Mechameshes minim. So now each one is tevel. Tevel is asur midoiraisa. And now the eidava, now you properly mix them. Now it's correct. For Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, ein loiken al chalasan dvar Torah, and Reish Lakish will hold, since he holds that isurim nullify each other. So the isur of tevel biblically went away. You have 25 pounds. Doesn't matter. Tevel is from wheat. The wheat is a minority in the other 4 types. Each one is it's crazy. Is a minority in the other 4 types. By the way, pigel and oiser is the same thing. You had more than a kazais of each. Nevertheless, we say they're batal. You have more from one over the other. Here, each one is batal in the other one. How is each one batal? Because you have 5 minim. Each one vis-a-vis the other 4 is already a minority. So if that would have been the case, and Reish Lakish would have said, which he would say, ein loiken dvar Torah, and you would say, Rabbi Yochanan argues, you would be right. Because in this case, Rabbi Yochanan Taka would argue. It is here where Rabbi Yochanan says that once something is asur, isur be-isur is never batal. You don't have the concept of bittul b'roi by isur be-isur. Beautiful. That's why I mentioned that by pigel and noiser, the case must be either that we know that there was more one of the other, or we follow the opinion that there is physically, even when we separate it 50-50 and it looks to us like 50-50, there is one more than the other. That's very important. Now, me'ingen le'ingen, now that we spoke this machlokes, isur be-isur is batal or not, mitzvah and mitzvah. Gewaldig. And now we understand why Hillel was the one that was koirech peisa matzo marer, which means the other ones didn't do that. Why not? And now when the Torah says, al matzo yisumerorim yerchlu, in other words, Hillel had a verse. A Pesach should be eaten al matzo sumarer. So why would anyone eat it separately? Because of bittul. How bittul? Even if you have exactly a kazayas, here it's not pigel and oiser, in the other side. It's tzad kedusha, mitzvah. Here there are 3 mitzvahs. If you, and what are we saying? That what's the roiv? 2 against 1. You can make an argument you fulfilled no mitzvah. What was that? Because Hillel holds, just like Rabbi Yochanan holds, isurim are not mevatel each other. Same logic. So how can mitzvahs be mevatel each other?
Then why was the bittul? Why would there be bittul?
You're eating it together. You're biting it together. You're eating 3 mitzvahs together. How great is this? Okay, now says the bottom of the Amid. Hillel hazakein hoyakoinach shlashtam ka'achas. Look inside the Marafulda, second to last line. Pesach matzu marav oichlam shlashtam ka'achas kedei lekayim. He had a source. He was mekayim al matzos umeroidim yoichlu, turning to davdalad amid beis. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, when we do this, we're not mindful. But everything implies The implication of Hillel is, says Rabbi Yechanan, chalukin al Hillel azaken. In other words, not like he we attribute it to him. No, there was a machlokes. Why? Attribute. Why? Because the Chachamim hold that mitzvahs are mevatel each other, and therefore they may not be eaten together. Now, hold on a second. How ironic. Rabbi Yechanan is the one that holds that a prohibited item cannot nullify each other. You would think that Rabbi Yechanan would say the same thing by mitzvahs. Aveda and mitzvah are chashuv in the opposite ways. This is against God's will. This is what Hashem wants. Something important. How can it be nullified? It's already a mitzvah. But Rabbi Yechanan, by the way, generally, we paskin like the majority. So you see that Rabbi Yechanan can tolerate that even if you're going to say that mitzvahs do nullify each other, prohibitions don't nullify each other. Yes, Kevan?
How did Hillel come up with the combining matzah and maror?
Because the verse seems to be saying that's how it should be done. When the pasuk, I think by Pesach Sheni, when the pasuk is speaking about eating Pesach, the Torah says, eat the Pesach al matzah umarer. Sounds like together. Fakert, you have to explain why would the Chachamim not do that? Why doesn't everyone do that? Now we know the reason. Because mitzvahs nullify each other.
Yeah, but are they saying that that's not what the Torah is saying, basically?
They're saying that that's not to be understood to be literally correct. The Torah is not saying to eat it together, to be eaten at the same time. The way we do it. Why do we don't have unfortunately, none of us ate a Pesach yet, but we have the matzah, and right afterwards we have the maror. We eat them together.
If you make a bracha on the head and hand tefillin separately, are they nullifying each other?
Very good. You're not eating them. I think eating is different. Because Kevin is pointing out, you're doing some with davening Shmoneh Esrei. We're doing the mitzvah of tefillah at the same time that we're doing the mitzvah of talis. At the same time, you're doing the mitzvah of tefillin. But you're not eating them together. Eating together is that you're not mixing. Here, you're mitzvah of them by eating them. But a good point. Point taken. So hold on. Hold on. That's the problem. Rabbi Yechanan did eat them together. Rabbi Yechanan, who was the one that taught us that the Chachamim hold that they nullify each other. So again, like I says, it sounds like you should follow the Chachamim. They nullify each other. How did they eat them together? And the Gemara gives two gavaldik answers, different gavaldik. Answer number one. Yeah, big difference. Kan b'shas hamigdash, kan shaloi b'shas hamigdash. Now, there are many different ways of understanding the Gemara's answer. Let's go with the following. Rabbi Yechanan holds, not like we paskin, that when there's no Beis HaMikdash, which means really there's no Mizbeach, which means there's no Korban Pesach, we paskin, Maror is midrabanan, we paskin matzahs doiraisa. Just to know, Rabbi Yechanan, today, Rabbi Yechanan doesn't learn that way. Rabbi Yechanan learns that both matzah and maror are only midrabanan. So like this, when the mitzvahs are midoiraisa, you have to get the logic. When the mitzvahs are midoiraisa b'shas hamigdash, one second, there is where we would hold that they nullify each other. When the obligation to begin with is only midrabanan, then what? One second. If the obligation is midoiraisa, Rabbi Yechanan holds that the Chachamim hold that they nullify each other, which is why they don't eat it together. They mevatel each other. They are mevatel each other. Yeah, so let's say if it's only midrabanan, then they don't become batel. Why? Yeah, why? Because there is the mevatel and the mevutel. The one that's doing the nullifying is not strong enough. The one that's becoming nullified is of equal. It's interesting. So in other words, it has to be explained. But at least there's Taka Rabbi Yechanan lived after the Churban. Rabbi Hillel lived Bisman Abayis. Rabbi Yechanan is telling you, Hillel laid it together, the Chachamim, and he's basically saying that when all of the mitzvahs are d'oraisa, you can't do three mitzvahs eating together because there is bittul. You ate them together. Yeah, it was only by a level of the Rabbanan. Let me go better. That's what you were saying. What did we learn? What's our sugya? That when the Mishnah says, let's go with Resh Lakish. Resh Lakish shows that the Yisurim do nullify each other. Which means that midoiraisa there's no tevel. But midarabanan, they never nullify. We already have this here, that by a rabbinic, I think it's a chumra derabanan. We're machmin midara. So midarabanan, they're not nullified. You can be yoytzeh derabanan. That's what it is. It's a chumra not to allow nullification. So you would argue if it's a derabanan, why would it be machmir? Because the Rabbanan says you should eat it. Midarabanan, there's no bittul. Or second answer, there's different ways of learning this Gemara. Minakotza lakotza. That's the way we're going to learn it. Vafilu teimar kan v'kan b'shas hamikdash. Even if Rabbi Yechanan would have lived when the temple is standing, even if they would have built a mizbeach in the times of Rabbi Yechanan, you know when Rabbi Yechanan allowed himself to eat matzah matter? Even if he would have had, he never would have eaten it together with Pesach. It doesn't say Rabbi Yechanan karach Pesach matzah matter. Rabbi Yechanan would eat the Pesach separate. He would have 2 mitzvahs matzah matter. He would take exactly a kazayas, efshel letzamtzein, and when they're equal, there's no bittul. That's the second answer. That shnei devarim, Rabbi malechadu mevatlon. Yeah, when you have 3 items, that's what Vlad was saying. Where do you have the right? By Bigel and Noiser, there clearly it must be that one was in quantity more than the other. If they were taka to be the same, no one will hold that you're not chayiv malchus. You violated pigul. How do you have bittul? We're introducing a concept of bittul beroiv because there are 3 items. So each item is a minority. Very good. Rabbi Yechanan didn't eat Pesach matzah matter. He only ate matzah matter. That means he would eat. Rabbi Yechanan would eat the Pesach. Then he would eat the matzah matter. Happens to be that nowadays we don't have a Pesach, which is great. What do we do? To give a koich to Hillel, we only eat the matzah matter. So now it comes out gavaldik that even the chachamim that argued with Hillel bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim, they still would allow us now to eat the matzah if you have the same shear. But if you look at a Lubavitcher koirech and you have a third of a matzah, a half of a matzah, and you have this mountain, it's the same. It's too much of this and too much of that together. This is so good. This is great. Okay. So says the Gemara that Atkan is Shitas Rabbi Yechanan, that the Chachamim argue with Hillel Hazakim. And if you were to have Pesach, Matzah, Matter, mitzvahs nullify each other. You would fulfill no mitzvah. But Rabbi Yosi, B'Shem Rabbi Lazar, holds that Kishem. One second. Rabbi Yechanan was a das yachid. It sounds like the others did not hold that there were those who argued with Hillel. The Gemara says no. There are more with Rabbi Yechanan. That Rabbi Yosef b'shem Rabbi Lazar. Now we all know Rabbi Lazar was a Talmud / chaver of Rabbi Yechanan. So they follow. Kishem she'ein ho'isurim mevatlam zen zem. This is shitas Rabbi Yechanan. First of all, he agrees with Rabbi Yechanan. He argues with Reish Lakish. Bitul isur veheter. Bitul heter veheter. Isur ve'isur are not mevatel each other. Just like same by mitzvahs, kach eina mitzvah mevatel zu azu, and therefore everyone will agree that you can be koirech Pesach matzah matter, and you won't nullify them. Why? Because the mitzvah adarabah is so chashuv. Let me say like this: when it comes to bittul, what are we looking at? Are we looking on the mevatel or are we looking at the mevutel? I don't know if my Hebrew is accurate or not, but you know what I mean. The mevatel is the one that's the majority, the minority. You can argue in both cases. You can argue that a mitzvah can never be, the mevutel doesn't allow itself to be mevutel. How can it humble itself when it's God's mitzvah? If you're looking at the mevatel, who a mitzvah is so powerful, a mitzvah can be mevatel. Or you can say, listen to this, that Kedusha means that I'm mevatel me, not mevatel you. So how can mitzvahs nullify each other? And what are we saying? He's saying that the matzah and the matter are so dominant that it makes the Pesach feel like a nothing burger. Mitzvahs don't do that. Look at a Yid, someone who's connected to God. their mitzias is never mevatel the other person's qualities. I'm outshining you. That's because I'm klipa, not because I'm kedusha. Maybe that's the pshat. So how
So it's
can
not on the same track as Isser and Isser?
Isser and Isser for sure won't work that way because Davar HaAsr is klipa. Klipa by definition, what's klipa? Do gardenstein it. That's the Isser.
I'm saying you can hold that when you combine like Isurim, they are mevatel, but with mitzvahs, they are not mevatel.
You can say that. I'll tell you better. Before we come to Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Lazar, in the beginning of the Amid, but Rabbi Yechanan, who is the one that holds that Isurim do not nullify each other, he goes in the opposite direction. He holds that mitzvahs do nullify each other. Rabbi Yechanan held that you can't eat Pesach Matzah Marer. You'll be fulfilling not one mitzvah. This is amazing. Let's go weiter, Chevra. Now we have a boya. Now this is very nuanced. 5 minutes will be enough. Mamish, this is a typical Yerushalmi. There'll be no nafkamina in what we're saying. You'll see. And that's part of the underlying message. We want to understand how things works, even if there is absolutely no nafkamina. Rabbi Yeshua, which one? Not Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua from the south. The Reimah. The South American. That one. The Chacham. Chachma's Daram. Not Argentina. Argentina's the arrogance, they cuts them off. No, let's go to the Brazilians. Boy. Also, Isa Machamesha Saminim, guys, halt cup. It's Gavaldik. Now, the original question was, like we began today's daf, you don't have the shear from anyone. You have a pound of each. You made a dough for mitzvah, and you mix the flour together. The Mishnah says a mitzvah from zemzeh. We already established whether either there's a machlokes Reish Lakish or Rabbi Yechanan, or everyone will agree that the Ravatal. But midrabanan you gotta take. Okay. Now for this to work, for this case to work, it's almost like Rabbi Shua the Reimah did not come to the shir in the beginning. He came like many people, he came late. So he doesn't know yet, they're going to correct him, that depends if each one began with the shir or not. The premise of this question is that everyone will agree now that you have the 5 pounds, you're chayiv midoraisa to take challah, even though it's not accurate. B'chlal not. But let's go with that premise. So now you have dough number 1, which is a mixture of the 5, which has the shear, chayiv challah midoraisa. That's the first dough. Now, this genius made batch number 2. Batch number 2 is not dough number 2. Batch number 2 is 5 doughs. He made 5 little doughs. None of them have the 5 pounds. So he has a little bit of wheat, a little bit of barley, a little dough alach. None of them are chayiv, not even midrabanan. V'chazar v'asa chamish yisiyos mimin echad. And now, ve'ervan, you took dough number 1, guys, you took a piece off it. If it's already chayiv challah, just for the record, if you're chayiv challah, just because now you broke it into pieces, you're still chayiv. So you took a little piece, you mixed it with the second batch. What do we want to know? The little batches is mutter, not exempt. Let's say the little batch of wheat, the little one, is 2 pounds. When you took a piece off, how much wheat do you have in it? A masho, a little bit. But maybe the batch number 2 wheat is mevatel, not all of the dough of batch number 1. The wheat in the first piece. So the wheat in the first piece should be exempt from challah. Not that you'll be pater of challah because the other ones are for sure not batel.
We start with
Nachamal. Guys, I want to say this again. This is so good. Vlad? No. That Gemara will correct that because you came on time. I'm telling you, he came late. It doesn't matter how much. It began like, you have now 5 pounds, chayiv challah. Okay, that's batch number 1. Batch number 2, I made 5 little bachelach. And I took the wheat. The wheat, let's say, each one is 2 pounds. I took the 2 pounds of wheat. I took a piece off the first and I put it into that. I mixed them together. What's the question? It's amazing. You can b'chlal argue if the one that's exempt is 2 pounds, if the little piece is 1 pound, all of it is batal. He already knew all of it will not be batal. So we're getting into another nuance. Only min b'minoi will be batal. Now this opens up a whole topic, because really we know Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana, that holds that min b'minoi is never batal. I don't want to get there. The premise of this, let's just accept. The other types, because batch number 1 has all 5 in it. The other minim won't be batal in the wheat. What might be batal? The wheat part of batch number 1 will be batal in the other. So even though it began with the chiyuv challah, what began with the chiyuv challah? All of it. Now the wheat of it should be exempted from challah. Does that mean you don't have to take off challah? Of course you have to take off challah, because of the barley, because of the spelt, because of the oats. But we want to know whether you were mavatal the wheat. That's what he asked. And ve'edvan, listen, the chitim of the second set, which is in quantity roiv, whether it will nullify not all of the little piece of the first, the wheat in it. And similarly, I took another piece and I mixed it into the barley one. I took another piece, I mixed it into the spelt one. So right away, Rabbi Barada corrected the premise, because the premise is wrong. Because if the batch number 1 was a mixture of 5, when the sum total is 5 pounds, then even Rabbi Yochanan, according to some opinions, everyone will have beheter. It's not chayiv. That's not the case. That only shnei devarim rabim malachim avatul l'moisei, blah blah, etc., etc. So the Gemara corrects. Yeah. That's not Rabbi Yeshua dereima loy tzarcha. No. You're right. In the case that you understood, or what I thought, I take that back. Of course, it is nullified, because there was never a chiyuv to begin with. The case was weird that I asked, where batch number 1 was. You had 5 pounds of wheat, 5 pounds of barley, 5, and you have not what you said, 25 pounds. Also, so now, what did we learn? We're going with Rabbi Yochanan. What did we learn? That isur be'isur is not batul, which means that batch number 1, this huge batch, is chayiv chala midorais, is tebel midorais. And now, when I take a piece off it, it's still chayiv midorais. And now, just quickly, that's the thing. Now everything else stands. And you made another 5 little batches. None of the 5 batches have the 5 pounds. None of them. The other batch, the other one you didn't even mix together. So you have a little dough of wheat, a little dough of barley, a little dough of each one. Now you took a piece of the first and you mixed it with number 1 of batch 2. Another piece with number 2 of batch 2. And now chitim shekan ma'ushivat lechitim shekan. The chitim of batch 2, which in quantity is more than the chitim. So item shekan ma'ushivat shekan. That is what he asked. The Gemara doesn't care to answer. We don't know the answer. We just made the right case where there's going to be a kasha. With no nafkamina. Why no nafkamina? Because even if the wheat, listen to me, from batch number 1 will become batal in the chitim of batch number 2, you'll be chayiv to separate challah, because you still have barley and it was chayiv challah. He doesn't care about that. He wants to understand how bittul works. If one would have the wisdom, which we have to just work on it, to know how to apply this amongst each other. I'm talking, when do you feel they were mavatal you? We'll figure this out. I think it's very deep, this. When we get together and we externally complement each other, but each one is trying to implicitly knock the other one down. You have a bunch of chevra together. I'm not knocking go. I'm only knocking the chitim in you. Does it work? Does it not work?
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, guys. This is great. This is developed. You can write a book on this stuff.